Hi everyone, I'm Sandie La Nae. Welcome to Psychic Creations. We have a fun show for you today. Psychic Creations has filmed several programs that are history related, such as inside the Nevada Historical Society in Reno, and an interview with Nevada historian Arlene LaFerry, and at historic locations such as the St. Charles Hotel in Carson City and the Dake House in Genoa. Now, our guest speaker today happens to be from Genoa, and she happens to be one of Psychic Creations' very first guest speakers. We invited her back today to speak about her awesome and exciting multi-talents and her businesses, which include Western History Alive. Please welcome once again, Kim Coppell-Harris.
Thank you for having me back again. This is like old home week, huh?
It is.
But thank you for having me back. This is always fun to be part of Psychic Creations.
It is. And it's always an honor to be interviewing you because you are so interesting. Oh, yeah.
Or crazy.
Well, that too, why not? We have to be, what we do. All right. Well, let's see. If you don't mind, if we get up close and personal with our viewers today, I'd like to ask you some questions about you before we really get into the thick of Western History Alive.
Sure, shoot.
All right. All right. Now, can you tell our viewers if you're a native of Nevada?
No, actually I'm not. I've only been here about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I came here kicking and screaming, actually. I was born in California and raised at Donner Lake, and I spent some time as a young adult in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I worked my way back up to the mountains because I'm a mountain girl and I miss the mountains, so I moved back up to the California side of Lake Tahoe,
Mm-hmm.
at the South Shore.
Mm-hmm.
And then about 5 years ago, we ended up moving down to Carson Valley, and the only place that I would agree to live was in Genoa because they had trees.
Well, good point.
And that was my concept of Carson Valley, but I have to say that I think I told you a while back, I was only there a few months before I ate my words, because I started to appreciate the valley and not only the Sierras from this side of Carson, from the Carson Valley side of the Sierras, but also being able to look across the spans of the valley and the pine nuts and become more acquainted with Nevada and learn to love sagebrush.
Oh, yeah, that does take a required skill, doesn't it?
So yes, I'm not a native of Nevada, but actually I feel closer to Nevada than I ever did to California, except for when, growing up at the Donner area. So,
well, how nice.
So and I've always been made to feel very welcome here, so at least up
Great.
until this interview.
Oh.
Where people know the truth.
Oh, funny. Oh, that's awesome. Now, can you tell our viewers just some interesting points of interest in your life?
Well, I probably have not been employed very traditionally in my adult life. I did start out right from high school, in management and office management and clerical, and it seemed that up until just about 20 some odd years ago, that's really was what I did for employment, but I was always bored at it. I mean, I was good, but I was bored. And with my first husband, he played ice hockey. And so I got involved helping to keep score, and then when we got divorced and I needed extra income, I started keeping, not only keeping score for adult hockey leagues, but I was hired by the rink to drive the Zamboni and to take care of everything, including cleaning locker rooms. But the reason I was hired to drive the Zamboni is they had like 15, 20 young men who wanted to, but the rink manager knew that they wouldn't do anything else except drive the Zamboni. They wouldn't clean up and stuff. So I had to be taught, and he knew I was afraid to drive it, so he figured it was a safe bet. So from there on out, I've been a Zamboni driver, and I still work clerical as a main job, but I played ice hockey, not professionally, but I played ice hockey for 15 years, mostly with the men because they didn't have a women's league. And so I've done a lot of fun things like that. Moving up to Lake Tahoe, I still worked in the clerical business, but I got to play ice hockey. But I finally got to the point where, you know, at being middle-aged, saying I just am not happy doing what I'm doing. And it was when I moved to Nevada that I had to reinvent myself, thanks to help of some of my friends.
Oh, really?
So yeah, those are some of the things that I've done in life. I started out traditional, you know, employment, but I kind of added part-time things in that were non-traditional.
Well, sure.
And I think that helped round me out as a person or make me crazy.
Well, well, sure. Okay. Well, can you tell our viewers how you got interested in history?
And you know, I'm lucky. I've always been interested in history, so I was the history nerd in school. And it was thanks to my father, who taught me from a very young age that history shouldn't be boring. History is cyclical, and you can learn from history. You know, you can either keep repeating the same mistakes, you know, looking back over the centuries and you know, thousands of years, or you can learn and change things, and you will also know that things will continue to come around. But my main interest in history was, you know, probably Western history, more with the Pony Express. I wasn't really interested in, you know, world history or anything like that,
Sure.
or before, you know, the West opened up. But it was thanks to my father and a 7th grade teacher who made us get involved in history. It wasn't just opening up a textbook, which doesn't, you know, gives you kind of a very clean, small Reader's Digest version of history, is what our textbooks did in school and in California. But she got us involved, and we had projects, and we had to live the history. And that stayed with me. That always stayed with me, and I always kept an interest. So wherever I lived as an adult, I was involved in the historical societies, and you know, learned a little bit more about at least California, and then, you know, the West Coast, and it kind of snowballed from there. So that
nice.
was, I think both my father and a very good 7th grade teacher who didn't make me feel like a nerd, who let me know what the importance was, and encouraged me to follow what I enjoyed doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you have been administrators or docents at the historical societies?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've been very fortunate to not only be, you know, a volunteer and a docent. That's kind of how I got started. But when time came that they had board positions that were open, that I had the skill to serve, I very happily served on the board. So I would have more involvement and a better understanding of the organizations that I work for. And at one time, I was on about 3 or 4 different boards.
Yes.
Yeah, and that, you know, you get to a point where you're afraid that you're not being efficient because you're pulled too many ways.
Right,
so,
sure.
you know, I've you know, scaled back, and I've stayed on the board of one historical organization, and I've let other people step in, and, you know, after I've served what I thought, you know, was a good amount of time,
Sure.
before I became inefficient. I'm enjoying watching the changes with new people and new ideas, but still being involved in these organizations,
Right.
locally and at the lake too.
Well, and then being in a position like that, it got you like closer into particular details of history,
Yes.
particular positions of history, the founding fathers per se, maybe for an example, the artifacts and things.
Yes. Yeah, and that was what I, you know, really enjoyed, and being at least part of the board when decisions had to be made. I found out how things came to us, the process, the value of what we had, the history of what we had. And prior to that, just, you know, being a volunteer, I would stay within my area of interest and perhaps not, you know, kind of be oblivious to how other things happen. So I think it was, you know, as long as I was helpful, it was good for me to step into those roles for a while, so that I would be a better, well-rounded person when I do my history research and present the history for my business, and understand how I can work with these organizations as well, and have them work with me. So they, you know me, I believe that there's, you know, reason for everything, and I think that was the timing and the reason. Was to, you know, be that involved with those organizations, and when I was too.
Well, sure. And then in regards, like you say, it helped your business. Can you tell our viewers just what Western History Alive is?
Oh, I'd be happy to. That's my
Okay.
primary business right now, my primary focus. And Western History Alive came about when I started portraying certain historic characters. It actually started with the Pony Express. And I saw a need to kind of organize it. And a long-term goal was to, you know, organize it to where I could bring other people in and help connect them with venues where we could present history in an entertaining way.
Sure.
I know I love books. I love to read books. But there are people out there who either don't really have the time, or to them, opening up a history book was like what I mentioned when we were in school. It's just a Reader's Digest, very dry presentation of
Sure.
history. When I first saw a Chautauqua performer for the first time, and that was McAvoy Lane, or that I was aware was portraying Chautauqua, which is first-person living history. McAvoy Lane, as probably many of you know, portrays Mark Twain in our area, and he's fantastic. And I love to tell this story if we have time.
Sure.
You know, probably lightning will strike me, but I just didn't get Mark Twain and his humor. I didn't get it. I could open up several books and I just didn't get it. I saw him at a dinner do 15 minutes, and I'm talking about McAvoy Lane, and all of a sudden the light bulb went on. I understood Mark Twain's humor. I just needed to see it.
Sure.
And so I thought, if that it's like that for me and I already love history, what about people who would be more interested in history if they felt they met the person in real life? And so, you know, I did not know McAvoy Lane in person. I only saw him as Mark Twain, so I believed he was Mark Twain.
Sure, yeah.
You know, even suspended disbelief, even though I know he was, you know, Mark Twain died many years ago. But the light bulb went off, and so already portraying a couple characters and wanting to share the history, not just with, you know, children in schools, but with adults, and make it a business, and be flexible. I talked to him a bit about how he got started, and he's worldwide known and critically acclaimed and award-winning and so forth. That is how Western History Live got started, and so I set up a website and got business cards and, and made contacts, and I hope to grow it in the near future to not necessarily have me be an agent, but have me be a resource to connect people I know who present history, either, you know, through being an author or living history, or any kind of form to connect them with venues that would like to hire them or have them come out and present. And so our motto is, history is made every moment, every hour, and every day by every one of us. Make our history count, keep it alive. And that's what I think we should do, is we should be out there not letting people forget our history, but just to keep it alive so that we can, you know, have more people be excited and more people go back to what my father taught me. You learn from the past, not just to not make mistakes, but to also know things are going to come around again, and to understand where we're at by knowing what came before us. So that's the basics of Western History Live, but it can grow in any direction, I think. There's a lot of things we can do with it.
And you were very passionate about this business.
Very passionate, yes, yeah. But, you know, that wasn't my first business, though, when I moved here. You remember?
No, it wasn't. I do remember.
Sandie remembers, because
I do.
if you recall what I said earlier in our program, that I moved down here and I just did not want to go back to work in an office. And my experience in the past with that, not to you know, knock that, but my experience is I would maybe work for a larger corporation, then you became a number, and then you got laid off because they moved the business overseas, or, you know, downsized. And when I worked for a small business, they would either close or they would sell out to a larger business. So I didn't have control. I didn't feel like I had control, no matter how well I did my job.
Right.
So when I had a chance to start out, my husband said, or my now husband said, you know, you love history. Why don't you give history tours of the town we had just moved to, which is Genoa. So not only am I not a Nevadan, I'm not a long-term Genoa resident in 2011. I'm a month long. I knew a little bit about Genoa through researching for the Pony Express, and the idea was to be a historic authority on Genoa.
Okay.
But in doing research, because any good history person does,
Yes.
I found that even in the research that I did about giving tours, just straight history tours were mostly given by historical societies. And that was part of it. They were for free, and it was a docent's job, which is wonderful. But I couldn't make a business out of it if I couldn't charge money. So the second idea came up between
Yes.
my now husband and my friend Sandy.
Yeah, hi.
Is that, well, the thing now is ghost tours.
Yes.
And ghost tours are usually about history. If they're a good tour, it's about historic
Yes.
towns and businesses, and then the hauntings as well. And that I could charge a good,
Yes.
a decent fee for, make money, and also share history with people. So I started Genoa Historic Ghost Tours, and I also started it with the idea, if you remember in mind, to also benefit the town, because where we would be walking through it would benefit the businesses.
Sure.
So I started with that in mind, so that I was hoping that the business people in town would embrace it. And I also did a lot of volunteering in town as soon as I could to get to know people,
Sure.
to know the history of the town more. I did months and months of research,
I did.
adding to what I already knew. And then Sandy, I remember I consulted you. I had a few of your books, but I consulted you about the hauntings that you knew of,
Yes.
of Genoa. And I talked to a few people that were willing to talk to me about things that occurred in their buildings or to them. And we put together a pretty good 2-hour, well, actually it would have been 6 hours if we did the whole thing, the whole town.
Yes.
So we had to knock it down to 2, because as good a speaker as I am, nobody would want to listen to me for 6 hours. I don't want to listen to me for 6 hours. So we did knock it down to a few, like 3 or 4 different types of tours, but we're no more than really 2 hours long. If you remember that. So got you involved, and Sandy, you come, whenever you have the time,
I
and
do. It's
joins us
fun.
on tours. And we started that in May of 2011, and it's primarily a May to October business, but we get a lot of people from out of town that
Sure.
want to know the history and want to know about the hauntings. And our motto with Genoa Historic Ghost Tours is Genoa, where the ghosts help to tell the history.
I love that.
And I think that's very important, because the ghosts are the history.
They are.
And you can't always find out everything you need to know historically in a book. A lot of the people who have things that they kept in their mind have gone. They're the ghosts now. And
Very
there's
true.
holes in stories, aren't there? And I feel that I'm true to the history, as true as I can
Sure.
be, and I keep researching, and you're true to what you know and what you feel there. And between you and I, we have experiences where the ghosts have helped to fill in the holes over a period of a
Yes.
couple years or 3 years.
Yes, they
So
have.
that's the fun thing. So
It is very fun.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's the fun thing.
I couldn't have said it better. Wow, what a busy person that you are.
Yes, it keeps
Well-
me out of trouble.
Oh, well, darn. Well, now, you have mentioned the Pony Express quite a few times. Can you explain to our viewers the association that you have with that organization?
Well, thank you, Sandy. I would love to, because that's
Yes.
basically what started it all. That's basically what started. As I said a little earlier, that was my main area of interest. So about 2010, which was the 150th anniversary of the Pony Express, which was an actual venture that lasted only 18 months, we had a celebration up at the Lake Tahoe Historical Society Museum, and we had a reception and invited people to come in so they could hear the history. And I actually dressed up as one of the riders and told the history of the Pony Express next to the mochila, which is the actual pouch that carried the mail in the museum. And it was fun for that day, but then after that we had some people ask if I could come talk at a senior center at different places, so we took it on the road. And it was fun to share the history of the Pony Express, because that was my passion. And that's actually what opened the door to me being interested in other areas of Western history, as I said before. But I mentioned it was the 150th anniversary in 2010, so that was a venture that actually started in 1860. For most people have heard of the Pony Express, and they've seen movies, and it was, the Pony Express riders were the rock stars of the day. They carried the mail nearly 2,000 miles from the Mississippi River to Sacramento, and we didn't have telegraph out here, and we didn't
Oh.
have trains, and the war between the states was coming. And they did an amazing thing. They cut the time in half to deliver important messages. They went from 24 days to by stagecoach to being able to deliver these messages in 10 days. And it was a relay of horses and men who ran 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And these were young men, and it was a very dangerous venture. And like I said, they were the rock stars. And about 1974, some gentlemen were sitting around one of the restaurants that had been a Pony Express station in Pollock Pines, and we're talking about the history was being lost.
Oh,
And
well, sure.
people, kids and people didn't know much about the Pony Express anymore, and wouldn't it be a great idea to reestablish and rewrite and restore the Pony Express Trail? Now, in 1964, they had run a centennial re-ride, and
Oh, nice.
they had over 1,000 riders ride both ways from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento and Sacramento to St. Joe, and do it in 10 days. But that was a celebration, meaning
sure.
to just celebrate that 100-year anniversary. But these gentlemen sat down and they said, why can't we do this every year? And it might make it a little easier. There's not that many, they'd have to start the organization up, and this was California that I'm speaking of. And they wanted to start it up in each of the 8 states that the Pony Express ran through, so it would take a while. So their idea was just to maybe run one way each year, maybe start in Sacramento and go to St. Joe in 74, and then in 75 they'd start in St. Joe and
sure.
go back.
Yeah.
And do it in June, because actually no other significance except that going through mountain passes like in Colorado and Wyoming
sure.
and California, the snow would be melted.
Right.
So, so since about 1974, every year the Pony Express rewrite has taken place.
How fun.
And interestingly enough, probably a lot of you know that most horse owners nowadays are women. But and it was that way in the 70s and 80s too, a lot of women horse owners. But women weren't allowed to ride in the re-ride until 1990.
Oh, is that right?
And a couple pioneer women, Melba Leal being one of them, who's written a book about women in the Pony Express. Her husband and her friend's husband were members and did the re-ride every year, and they were only allowed themselves as women to help pull the trailers and just help out, and they wanted to ride and kept being told there were no women riders in 1860 and 61. Well, as it turned out, most of the re-riders were men in their 50s and 60s, and some weighed around 200 pounds. And after years of arguing, I believe Melba said, and I'm paraphrasing, there were no 60-year-old, 250-pound men riding either. And they won the argument, and now, believe it or not, in our re-ride every June, there's about 500 to 700 riders, some from other countries that come over from Germany and other countries, and the majority of the riders are women.
Is that right?
Yes, and we're able to, for the most part, re-ride the historic Pony Express Trail, and Nevada has the largest portion of the trail that is still original and not paved over.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so sitting right here in Carson City, where this is being filmed, it's on the Pony Express Trail. And Genoa is part of the trail, and so, but I was excited to find out when I was volunteering in 2010 at the museum in Lake Tahoe that I could become a member. I don't own a horse and have ridden a horse off and on over the years, but I wouldn't refer to myself as a horsewoman. But I could become involved. I could be a member. There were things that I could do. So I joined the California division, but oddly enough, I couldn't make the meetings easily because living in South Lake Tahoe, their meetings were on Sunday in Cameron Park. And if I were traveling down to their meetings, I would be most of the time going home with the tourists.
Okay, sure.
And so it just wasn't worth it. So about the time I decided that I could join the Nevada division, who meets in Carson City, right there at Grandma Hattie's.
Sure.
We ended up moving here. And with that division, there was more of a need for involvement from people who not just riders. So for those of you out there who, I mentioned the re-ride, and a lot of people who even know about the re-ride may, understandably think that that's the only reason we exist, is just to redo the ride in June. But there's a lot more to what we do. There's the history, there's sharing the history, not only with people like yourselves, but also going to the schools, because in 4th grade, I believe, in elementary schools is when they're learning their state history. So we go out to schools in our area, and we take the horses out, and we demonstrate a mochila exchange, we talk about the history, and so we're out there sharing with the children. But we're also looking for venues and asked to come to different venues just to talk about the history of the Pony Express. We have some membership drives coming up. We have one coming up the end of this month, the 27th. It's going to be Thursday at 6 o'clock at Cabela's in Verdi, and everybody's welcome to come. We need more riders. We need younger riders. As any organization that's a volunteer organization runs into this problem, you get the same people doing the same thing all the time, and all of a sudden you notice that it's starting to age out, and we always need younger people.
Sure.
And we need people to share the history. We need people to be ground crew during the re-ride. We go on trail rides. We get together and do fun things and do cookouts and trail rides.
Well, fun.
And people who are involved, with horses in other organizations, this is just something else that they can do with their horses. And get out there and meet new people. So the Pony Express, while it's not still delivering, the nation's mail, we are still very much alive. And what we do deliver the mail in June. You can write a letter or order a vignette to have sent to anybody, anywhere in the United States or elsewhere. And it gets put in the mochila and locked in the mochila, whichever place it's leaving, east or west. Next year it's going to start out in Sacramento, but you can order a letter. It gets locked in the mochila, and it is not removed until it gets to the end of the line this coming year in St. Joseph, Missouri, and then it gets put in the mail. So the point is you get a letter stamped with the Pony Express official stamp from its beginning point to its ending point. And so the mail can still go by horse, so it's gone completely across the western United States by horse. So that's something that everyday person can do. You don't have to be a member.
Oh, how fun would that be?
So it's a fun part of history, and I mentioned earlier it only lasted for 18 months, but everybody knows about it. And the funny thing is people think it lasted that much longer, years, because it was very important, and like I said, the young men were rock stars, really. To everybody. So that sparked my interest, and I think from the era of the Pony Express, I saw everything else that it touched in our western United States and how much it contributed, and from there, that's when my interest in history grew. But I did start out being a Pony Express rider, doing living history, and so that couldn't be further from the truth, being that I'm not a young 20-year-old male who rides horses every day.
Well, haven't you been in the re-ride?
I have. I've been in the re-ride, yes. 2 years, last year and the year before, and I had the year before I had the honor of riding into Genoa, where I live, and into Mormon Station State Park, and that was really a thrill for me, and riding with my friend Ernie Bugg, who as I said, I don't own a horse. I borrow his horse.
Sure.
And I also rode out in the area where Fort Churchill is. And so I got to ride into a modern town that at one time was a Pony Express station, but now we have modern buildings and cars, pavement. And then the second part of that day, and last year I rode in the same area, out beyond Fort Churchill, where there's no cars, except the support group that's following us for safety. But you could actually ride and look around and see no sign of human life or anything modern, and then you knew that is what the rider who rode that area, that's exactly what he saw 150 years ago.
Oh, good point.
Yeah, so that was the thrill to me, is being able to ride into Genoa, but also to ride in an area where I could imagine what it was like, because the landscape hadn't changed in 150 years. Yeah.
Oh, what a good point that is. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so now I've done just a little bit of everything in the Pony Express, but that is my first love, and I'm very passionate about it. But it was during a very exciting time in our lives, you know, in our Western history.
It was.
Yeah.
Now, with Chautauqua, perhaps you can explain to our viewers what Chautauqua is, but you mentioned that you portrayed a Pony Express rider in the Chautauqua?
Yes, yeah, and that's how I got started, is just trying to share the history in a little bit more exciting way. And for those of you who don't know what Chautauqua is, it's named after an area in New York. And there was a movement, you know, a few hundred years ago to present history in first person. Now, a true Chautauquan, you know, dyed in the wool, would say, let's use an example of portraying President Lincoln.
Okay.
He will get up and he will give his presentation in front of a group of people, modern day people, and he will allow questions at the end of his presentation. But he is President Lincoln. So if somebody in the audience were to ask how he got started portraying President Lincoln, he couldn't answer that because he is President Lincoln. So the question should actually be addressed to him and about his times and how he made his decisions and what he did in his life. If somebody said, well, something about using a telephone or getting into a car, he would not be able to answer because he would have to portray that he didn't know what that was. So that's a true Chautauquan.
Okay.
Now McAvoy Lane is a true Chautauquan, but out here in the West, we're a little bit more relaxed, and I follow his lead, and another wonderful Chautauquan, Diana Maria de Borges. She portrays Sarah Winnemucca, who is from this area. And what we all do is we do our Chautauqua in character and don't deviate until a certain point when we take questions. First, we'll take questions in character, so we want the audience to be asking us, you know, asking the character we're portraying. But then, I learned this from McAvoy. If you want people to be interested, take a moment to answer questions as the real person that you are. Because most people out here, especially those who aren't familiar with Chautauqua and living history, want to know how you got started. I would hate to discourage somebody from doing what I'm doing because I won't answer that question.
Oh, good point, sure.
So we just kind of put it into, you know, what we do is we just divide it up and we just let the people know that afterwards you can ask Kim Coppell Harris
Sure.
any question you want. How much research did it take? What inspired you to do this? How do you know so much about your character?
Oh, that's nice.
So that's what Chautauqua was. But yes, I started out doing Warren Upson, and I was participating in a fundraiser with McAvoy Lane and another great Chautauquan, Steve Hale, who portrays Snowshoe Thompson.
Oh, yes.
Another well-known character from our area. And a friend of mine was in the audience, a somewhat new friend who I'd only been living in Genoa for a short time and met her. And she was an actress in a local theater, grew up in local community theater, and she looked at me and said, we need to find a female character for her to portray. So she was writing a play, and she had portrayed Eiley Bowers in the past.
Sure.
And Eiley Bowers was the famous Washoe seeress, and at one time the most wealthiest woman, you know, in the United States. And she and her husband, you know, were wealthy by way of the Comstock, and had a mansion in Washoe Valley. But she had, Lisa Bomarito had this idea of how Eiley Bowers would react when she wanted everything to be society, would react to somebody like Julia Boulay, who was the most famous working girl in Virginia City. So she posed that idea to me, and I thought it was a very interesting idea. We developed a play around it, and how these two ladies despised each other. They thought they were so different, but through the play, it portrayed actually how parallel their lives were. But my parents were so proud that I was playing a prostitute. So
different from playing a Pony Express rider.
Yeah. But after that play ran for a couple years, then we went off in our own directions. and just to do Chautauqua. And so she does portray Eiley Bowers as Chautauqua, and I do a Chautauqua portrayal of Julia Boulay and her times, and so the interesting and the comedy of it, and the very sad part of it. And then also she was murdered, so I go into her death. And but again, another opportunity came up to portray another character. And I'd always been interested. My second love was the stagecoaches, and the era of the stagecoaches. And this came before the trains, and I love trains too. And I ran across an interesting story of a stagecoach driver that was almost as famous as Hank Monk and worked with Hank Monk, and that was Charlie Darky Parkhurst.
Okay.
Well, now, are you aware of Charlie's story?
I'm not too familiar, no.
Well, I don't want to give everything away, but Charlie Parkhurst was known as One-Eyed Charlie because early on in his career he was kicked in the head by a horse and lost sight in one eye. But he was almost as skilled, or he's right up there with Hank Monk, and Hank Monk was known as the Jehu of the Sierras, and Jehu is a biblical term for chariot drivers. And so Charlie was right up there, and driving with one eye, depth perception's a little bit off, so I mean he had to be that good. And he drove in this area for a while, and there's a lot of interesting stories surrounding him. And I like to portray him because I can also tell stories of other stagecoach drivers.
Oh,
and
yes.
Not only his stories, but the stories of other local stagecoach drivers. And there's stage robberies, and there's runaway stages, and there's stories of gold, and also stories of ghosts. So I have a lot of fun with Charlie. As a matter of fact, Charlie, I'm sorry the other characters, but Charlie's my favorite.
Sure.
And there's Charlie had a very interesting life and an even more interesting death. So I don't want to give away that part of it. You'll have to come see me perform Charlie.
Of course, because that's intriguing. I need to go see her show.
So now I'm moving up here.
Okay.
But I'm back to playing a male.
Oh.
And my husband calls me his favorite cross-dresser. So,
well,
but then I had another opportunity come up with, and a lady, unfortunately, she just recently, about 3 weeks ago, passed away, and that was Grace Bauer, former president of the Douglas County Historical Society. But she's funny. She was abrupt, and she was direct and to the point, and you just had to kind of run with her. And I was on the board with her. I was her secretary when she was president, and a Women in History project that they do every year. They honor 4 women in history in Douglas County each year. And they were going to do something a little bit different 2 years ago because they were going to celebrate women's right to vote in Nevada.
Okay.
And she looked at me and said, for this, could you portray Lillian Virgin Finnegan? And for those of you who don't know, Lillian Virgin Finnegan is best known for, in 1919, coming up with the idea of the Genoa Candy Dance. And that was to raise money to buy street lights in 1919 in Genoa. They'd had electricity, but they wanted street lights. And it's a small little town, and even today, if we want anything, we have to have a fundraiser. And so I said I'd be happy to. I don't know how that would fit in, but I could tell the story of how she raised money, and did the very first candy dance. And Grace said, no, earlier than that, 1914, when she helped women gain the right to vote in Nevada. Well, I knew nothing of this, so I had to do a lot of research. And I only had a few months to do it. And so then I, of course, went to Arlene LaFerry at the Nevada Historical Society to help me, which, if you're following these shows, you know how awesome she is. And I developed the character and I found out so much about her life that starting the candy dance was just this little thing. But I found out why everybody in town went to her, why she was the go-to person to organize something. And that was the question. When I put together a character and do my research, I want to find out the why.
Good point.
Why does this person do this? Why does this person, live like this or act like this? And so I learned an awful lot about Lillian Virgin. And I think it's kind of sad in history. And let's go back to why I do what I do.
Sure.
Because sometimes when things are written in books, not sometimes, quite often, when things are just written down in books and those stories get, passed down and passed down, what is Lillian Virgin Finnegan is probably the best example of what has happened. Is her life was much bigger than being the woman who started the Candy Dance in Genoa, Candy Dance Festival. But that's all that's remembered of her now. But her life was much more exciting. There was much more influence that she had.
Right.
Charlie Parkhurst, same thing. People remember this story or that story about him. But his life was much bigger than that. Julia Boulay, another excellent example.
Right.
They remember her as being an honorary member of the fire department up there, of the Engine Company No. 1, and her brutal murder. But there was much more than that. So right now, and 4 characters is enough. I portray those 4 characters, and I just pray that I don't get Julia mixed up with Lillian Virgin in one performance, because those women are really far apart. Lillian's probably the most respectable person I portray. So my fear is getting the 2 of them mixed up at some point. But these four personalities are why I do what I do.
Oh my goodness sakes, Kim, you are, wow, busy.
Busy, yes, very busy, yes.
But just sitting here, it's interesting, just sitting here watching her speak, the passion, the love that she has for your businesses. No, I don't mean to talk about you like in a third person, but I'll talk to you here. Your passion and your love for your characters, the respect for the history.
Well, I just want people to be as excited as I am about whatever part of history speaks to them.
Well, I think you do a darn good job of it.
Thank
Don't you agree, viewers? You bet.
Thank you. Sandie, I was thinking though that I may kind of joke a little bit about portraying a man and portraying a prostitute, but there's something that I feel that's very interesting to me when I do portray these characters, and I hope it's because of my dedication to research and because my dedication to really wanting to understand these people that I've chosen to portray is I'm a paranormal investigator, with psychic creations. No, with Thin Veil Investigators. And my beliefs, again, the ghosts help to tell the history with historic ghost tours. I believe, because I want to share the not characters, they were people, they were live people. And I want to share their story as accurately as I can. There are times when I feel that they have been there helping me. Because I will look back, especially probably Julia Boulay's monologue and putting together the play, aside from Lisa's help and wisdom and experience and my writing and my research, I will look back and I will wonder, how on earth did I ever put the things together the way that I did? Because before each performance, I'll take time to go over the monologue and rehearse it just to make sure I'm doing the best job that I can. But with Lillian Virgin Finnegan, I'm sure she was right there helping Arlene find the little articles that helped put the pieces together. I think she's there in Genoa with me, and I think she's right there making sure that I'm not making anything up, or that I'm doing the best I can to at least show what her life was like. So without sounding too out there, I believe that any good Chautauquan, and I believe Diana would say something similar, and probably McAvoy Lane. McAvoy Lane's his website is The Ghost of Twain.
Oh,
So
is it?
It is.
Interesting.
And I think I had that right. So I think it's important. I just wanted to convey to the audience that I'm not just reading something and then making it up and just doing this for stage purposes. I really want the story to be told the best way that I can, because I'm sharing history. And I would like to believe, and I feel that they're there with me, pointing me in the right direction, or maybe over my shoulder saying, no, that isn't how I would have said that. So I think the ghosts are helping to tell the history there too.
I think that's a very good, interesting point that you brought up, because working with different actors and actresses, well, throughout my life, giving them intuitive readings, they too have told me that they feel that they're channeling that particular character. And I think we all have to agree with that because, like with you, I've seen many of Kim's portrayals, her character portrayals, the passion that comes through, the respect, the just you portraying that character. It's just amazing how you transform into that character.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's not that they, you know, it's not that those people, you know, love me and they think I'm their new little buddy. I think they just want to make sure I don't mess up and tell the story wrong. So they're coaching me there, you know. But
Right.
I
Sure.
feel very, very strongly that that is what happens. So
You-
that's why I choose my characters very carefully.
Sure. Well, you and many other actors and actresses, I've heard that same story before, so I think there's something to that.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Then we're on the right track.
That's right. All right. Well, let's see here. I think it's time for you to start handing out lots of contact information, if you could. First, how do people contact you for your Western History Alive?
If someone is interested in for an event or for a school, you know, for me to come out, I can do that too. Probably not Julia Boulay, but for Western History Live, you can get a hold of me. Probably one of the easiest ways is my my phone number, which
Okay.
is 775-220-0605. But if you're shy and don't want to talk to me on the phone, you can email me at kim@westernhistoryalive.com. You can check out my website at westernhistoryalive.com. So that's the best way to find out what I do, what, you know, a little bit more about the characters, if there's something I can do to fit in to an event that you have coming
Sure.
up. You know, I'm open to anything. I also list my fees, but you know, sometimes depending upon the situation or the organization, fees are negotiable. So don't let that scare you off
Sure.
if you look at my website. You know, always talk to me because we can always talk about anything. It's more important to share the history, but you know, yes, this is my business.
Sure. Well, of course it is. Sure, you bet. And how can people get a hold of you to go on one of your Genoa Historic Ghost Tours?
Oh, that's easy to do too. And I want to say that generally we do the tours between May and October, but because I am busy and I also will be working again part-time as the events coordinator at Dangberg Home Ranch Historic Park in
Nice.
Minden. I have to be more flexible about giving the tours. So the tours aren't just on the weekends, and what I try to do is work with anybody that calls if you're in the area and you want to go, as long as you can be flexible within a couple days. I usually can accommodate you. So between May and the end of October is the high season, simply because the weather's better. But if you called me now and it was a nice day and you want to bundle up and I don't already have something going on, I'd be happy to take you around town. So again, same phone number, 775-220-0605. You can email me at info@genoahistoricghosttours.com, so there's 2 T's in there. And do I have a website for that?
Let me see. You have Facebook sites.
I have
don't
a,
you?
oh yes, I do, but I don't,
Yes.
I don't have a website. Yes, I do have a website. I'm sorry, folks. That's how busy I am. Yes, I do have a Genoa Historic Ghost Tours website, but thank you, Sandy. I have Facebook pages, and that's most people today. You've got to have a Facebook page
Sure.
because that's, you know, instantaneous information. So, Western History Alive is the Facebook page, and Genoa Historic Ghost Tours is the Facebook page. So you can find us on Facebook.
Well, I'll be adding all of her contact
Yes.
information underneath when I edit my own shows here. So I'll add that too. And just one more. Do you happen to have the Pony Express contact information, or?
Yes, yeah, I do, and there's several ways you can get a hold of our organization. Now, I'm the secretary this year for the organization.
Oh, nice.
And so as far as membership or questions, you can call me again at the same number, 775-220-0605. We have an email address, that's nevadaponyexpress@gmail.com. And we have a website and a Facebook page, which Sandy, I believe you'll put that information.
I'll add those on, yeah.
Yes, because it's
Underneath.
not, I make it simple for my businesses, I keep it all the same, but we want to make sure you get the right information, because there are different Pony Express organizations in each of the 8 states.
Oh, good
yeah, 'cause
point.
we're all statewide, we're a national organization, but each state has their
Mm-hmm.
own organization as well. So we don't want to get you to Wyoming when you want to know about Nevada, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Good point. Well, Kim, I don't know what to say. Wow, you are busy.
Well, thank you for having me on. And, you know, quite seriously, I seem busy, but it's all things that I'm passionate about.
Yes, you are.
And if you're busy, you generally can stay out of trouble or make a heck of a lot of trouble yourself by being busy. So probably the next busiest person I know is Sandie La Nae.
Oh.
So we're looking forward to your next book coming out, too.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, it's fun to write. If I can boast that, it's Weird Carson City. So it's going to be a nice volume to our trilogy.
Yes, well, hopefully there's a weird ghost story in there or a weird Pony Express story in there.
We'll have to make sure
We'll
that
have to
there
find
is.
out.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being
Thank
on
you,
Psychic
Sandy.
Creations. It's always an honor.
Well,
And
it's
she's
fun.
a good friend, too. So.
Yeah, and it's always fun. It's always fun.
Sure. All right. Well, let's see. I hope that you enjoyed today's show with Kim Coppell-Harris. And if you would like to be a guest speaker on my show, Psychic Creations, please know that the content is of the metaphysical, spiritual, paranormal, and, of course, history. You can get a hold of me at my website, which is www.sandypsychicstones.com. Or you can get a hold of me at my email address, which is admin@sandypsychicstones.com. Again, thank you so much for watching Psychic Creations, and we'll see you next show.